all the neighbors, it's time for Scoops Out Loud. We are back. I'm Al Isaacs, and the guy over there, who are you again?
Nicholas Isaacs.
Nicholas Isaacs, that's right. It's once again time for Scoops Out Loud. This week, we are talking about something near and dear to me, part of my life since the late 80s. We're talking about wrestling video games. Starting in the arcades in the 80s, tag team wrestling. I had an advantage back then being a drummer. I had fast fingers, so I was a fiend in the arcades. And then it came to home video on well, no, not the Atari 2600. Man, I'm dating myself. Atari 2600 did not have a wrestling game, but man, Nintendo did. Pro wrestling on Nintendo, man. Starman, still love that. But today we have a very special guest who was a big part of pro wrestling games on the home market. Mike Archer from Acclaim will be joining us. But before he comes in, Nick, this show is all about the difference between my generation and your generation when it comes to anything in pro wrestling. For me and my generation, my biggest gripe when it came to wrestling video games was physics. We were able to get past the amount of guys you could or couldn't have. We got past the graphics issues, glitches, and so on. For me, my problem was physics. I hated seeing Shawn Michaels body slam Yokozuna. And I'm sure Lex Luger has a problem with that as well. But that was it for me. I couldn't stand, the reality just got sucked right out. But I'm curious, for you and your generation, I hear you guys complain about a lot of the different games. We stare at you going, I can't believe you have issues. But what are your main issues with today's games?
Well, I know I have different views than a lot of the other people in my generation, but I know that a kind of common pet peeve for a lot of people in the wrestling video games today is glitches. Those really are a thing in not just wrestling video games, but video games in general that just have not changed over the generations. We saw that with 2K20, which was by and large a unfinished game, but yeah, it's just a lot of people want to have a finished game. They want to have a clean game that they don't have to, I guess, have to turn on and off every now and then, so that they they're able to play it. I completely understand that. For me personally, my pet peeve with wrestling video games, I think, would be almost too much realism because I love simulating a wrestling show and stuff, having like a realistic sort of simulation of wrestling matches and stuff. But for me, it's not good for me for replayability. Like I could simulate a million different matches, but in the end, it just starts to not get fun. And that's kind of what I want to do when I turn on the game system. I want to have fun. So I think definitely games like WWE All-Stars and other games like 2K Battlegrounds that's coming out soon are taking advantage of that you still have something that is very recognizable as wrestling, which I like. But at the same time, it's a fun beat 'em up game, which I also really like. So
because over the years there have been in my limited purview that there are three different kinds of video games for wrestling, and video games is probably the wrong word, but you have what I grew up on, the Nintendo Pro Wrestling, which it was a button masher that you go in there, there's that set of moves and that was kind of it. Then you had what you're talking about, the simulations, which the 2K games, each year trying to top the year previously by becoming more and more realistic. But at the same time, the amount of stuff that you have to learn in order to do anything, for an old guy like me, it's a lot. And then there's the other kind of game which we're going to devote an entire episode to in the near future, which is the text-based stuff. With my friend Oliver Kopp, who did TNM. For people who remember Scoops, TNM was such a huge part of that website when I used to do Tabloid Wrestling Federation, TWF, back in the day. And that stuff is cool. I just introduced you to that. That stuff's very cool, but it's really different than either the mashup or the scientific stuff. So for the 2K, I know we've gotten a pretty wide selection of those. Which, in your mind, was the most enjoyable to play?
I'd honestly have to say 2K19 for me was the best one for me. Mm-hmm. And the strange thing is, I don't know what it is about it that just felt like such a fun game to play. I don't know what aspect it was. I mean, I felt like it was a really fun game that was both simulatable, and it just had, I felt like it had a lot of options for me, and I like options. I like that. So right.
Let's not dawdle any longer. Let's bring him on here. We call him he's the godfather of all things pro wrestling with video games. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Archer. Mike, thank you so much for giving us some time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Mike, man, you and I go back a ways. When you were at Acclaim, like I was saying off screen, a lot of people consider you the godfather of wrestling video games. Man, you really were there when it all began, weren't you?
I was, Al. I was lucky to be there. My time at Acclaim was just a wonderful experience. The people I worked with, the people I worked for, and I got to meet guys like you. The people at WWE that I got to work with, the talent, you remember the day we had the talent come in and you worked with a lot of the guys, you know, I can't say enough good things about it. It was just a positive experience.
Right. So let me ask you, I'll start off with this. Were you a wrestling fan that learned to make video games, or were you a video game guy who became a wrestling fan?
I would say it's 50-50. I tried my hand at pro wrestling, at the Johnny Rod's Wrestling School in Brooklyn, New York. Yeah, that's how I met Tommy Dreamer. Okay. And I'm insulting real professional wrestlers because I stunk. I could hip toss and clothesline, and that was about it. And then I would gas out. I would just be out of breath. But
right.
I learned that I couldn't do it on the field, so I wanted to work in the business of the business. So, and I got to learn the ins and outs. And I think I had to learn more about video games than I did about wrestling. I'll tell you what, the best thing I did was go to the wrestling school and learn that it wasn't for me, because I would have looked back my whole life saying, what if?
Yeah.
And, it's like Mike Tyson always says, right? Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yep.
Well, everybody's Hulk Hogan until they take that first bump,
I probably pumped more quarters into arcade games. I could probably put him through college twice with what I spent in the arcades. But he has never played some of the games that we were used to back in the day. So I think he's a little bit spoiled with the idea of, these massive rosters and giant move sets and being able to download updates every now and then. With you guys at Acclaim, you put it out and it was out there. And that was
out, yes.
Yep,
cut and dry, and you didn't have to feed the beast every month. That's right.
Right. So what was for you and especially since you knew it, what was the most frustrating limitation, maybe with the technology at the time, stuff that you wanted to do that you couldn't do yet?
To be honest, the technology is always evolving, and so is the talent that's handling the technology. You could see, so let's say the first PlayStation 2 everybody was working off of, the first generation of products for that game probably maximized about 30% of what could be done, because we were all learning on the fly. And then by the time time you're able to max out at 100%, it's time to change consoles again.
Right.
But it's funny that you brought that up, Al, because I am working on a new 2D game called I don't mean to give it away, Retromania, but it's so a 2D it's a 2D game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
A great list of talent, great bunch of guys. Again, Tommy Dreamer, he helped out, and Stevie and the BWO is with us. So we're really proud. But it's such a different beast than when we were doing the 3D games. The 3D games, they're polygonal models and they're captured, while this is all keyframed and pixels. The good thing is this comes out a little quicker, right?
Yeah, right.
But it's not going to be as robust, and that's not what it was supposed to be. It's supposed to be pick up and play. So it's the actual successor of WrestleFest. So exactly, when you were talking about arcades and everybody that's ever played wrestling knows WrestleFest, and they know No Mercy, right?
Yeah, right.
Those are the games. Those are the wrestling games. So yeah, we're pretty excited about it. A strong list of talent. We're now polishing it now. It's at beta, so we're hoping to be out and about, around end of September, October. But it's for all the platforms. It just picked up a lot of steam as we went. We started out very small. Al. I would love for you to have the owner of the studio on if you ever could.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Or
let me ask you this on the wrestling side of it, because you were saying with limitations on rosters and such.
Yeah.
Would the WWF was there more pressure from them to change a game if they were losing a guy before the game come out, or if they knew someone was coming in to try and get him into the game?
We ran into that a few times, and WWE, they were smart business people. They understood. If we made the business case, I believe the whole Bret Hart thing came down right as we were, sealing boxes, and they were fine with it. They understood. Back in those days, like you said, you couldn't just update it on the fly. You would do what's called a running change. But 200,000 units would go out before that running change was made.
Right.
And, after years of working at WWE, you begin to realize that there's no cutoff date. The cutoff date of the talent is the day they leave. So there's a certain sell-off point. So, for them legally, it was okay. If there was, there was some situations where in my time at WWE, I had to say, pull him. He's got to come out. You know what I mean? But not many times. Not many times. And, roster-wise, I remember a time where Big Van Vader didn't even get to the road yet. And he came in to do In Your House with us, And, yeah, I know In Your House was a swing and a miss, and I understand that. It was
Nick said that, not me.
No, that's okay. Listen, I take the good with the bad, right? But it was Acclaim's first shot at an Ultimate game, the blue screen games,
right?
And by the time we got it done, by the time we got it clean, I think that's when Token Ritsuden had come out, and people were ready for the next generation, of video games.
Obviously, Acclaim was really well known for their WWF series of games, and I believe a lot of generations owe their love of not just wrestling, but games in general to those series. But I couldn't help but notice you also worked on a couple of other wrestling-related games, including the ECW series, Hardcore Revolution, Anarchy Rules, and also some Acclaim-made wrestling games, Legends of Wrestling, the first, the second, and the third one. Out of those series of games, which one do you think was the probably the most challenging one to make?
Well, so that's a great question, Nick. And So what the ECW game was the hardest, and only because it was a shell game with the licenses. So WWE was with Acclaim, WCW was with EA, and THQ was nowhere to be found, right? The game company. Well,
Right.
THQ, what they did was they went out and they kind of bought, I don't want to say bought, but they put money to hold on ECW. So
Okay.
they kind of had it and they shelved it and they put it in the closet, and then they went out and they got the WWE license. So like when I started the call, I told your dad that I was friends with Tommy Dreamer. I called him up one day. He was driving a truck, and I said, listen, we want to come talk to you, you know. And me and the head of Acclaim met Tommy Dreamer and Paul Heyman at the Freeport Rec Center, and we worked out, you know, a deal to get to extricate ECW from THQ and come to Acclaim. Did I confuse everybody thoroughly?
No, I was making a flow chart while you were saying that, so we're good.
I was confused while it happened. So basically, Acclaim got ECW, right? THQ got WWE, and EA had WCW.
Okay. But but with the ECW games, you were still basically using the same engine that you were using for the WWF stuff?
Yeah, you know, we did. And look, you do it nowadays a lot too, because the way the financial models with games are, it's upside down in terms of product development. You don't make your money back, you know, on the PD spend for like 3 iterations. So you have to keep using it. You have to clean it up more. You have to add more bells and whistles. You got to keep expanding. Right. But you do reuse a lot of the same code. It's all pipelines and tools, you know.
Sure.
And it's a must nowadays, because the spend on product development, you know, alone, that's cutting out marketing, is astronomical.
Right. But what was the first game when I met you, that BAB, the Sir Adamant of Phantom, you brought in a WWF game, and the only playable character that I was using was Goldust. Man, what game was that?
I don't know if it was WWF Attitude or Warzone. Warzone was the first one. Attitude was the second one. So you were saying about limitations, right? So in Warzone, we had about 13 talent, right? A year later, we had like 30 talent. There's the difference in same physical capabilities, right? Same hardware. Right. Just, you know, we got smarter as we move forward.
Right. But
that was a BAB. That's right. That was a good day.
That was a good day. It's amazing. The leaps in technology and the thing, because even back then, you know, the roster was what the roster was. You know, you did have the creator wrestler, which was okay, but like things like, you know, whether the guy was a babyface or a heel, like that's kind of, you know, built into the mix, and that's what you're going with. So
absolutely. And the truth was, you know, the creator wrestler was born out of research, because when I first started, everybody wanted to be Hulk Hogan or Triple H or The Undertaker.
Right.
And then 10 years into the business, they wanted to be in the ring being the partner of Hulk Hogan or facing off against Triple H. It became a very myopic look at things, but that's been one of the best features we ever added.
So happy that you're working on this new game, because before we spoke, Nick had shown me the video teaser trailer for it, and man, I got so excited. I just love that.
You know, it's a callback to us guys. You know what I mean? The classics. But the thing that I like most, Al, about this is we tried very hard to differentiate the roster enough to make it as eclectic as it can be. So, you know, like Jeff Cobb is in the game, right? Nikita Koloff is in the game. The Road Warriors, Austin Idol, like Tommy Dreamer, the BW. We're trying to give everybody, and we understand, because we do have limitations. It's a 2D product, right? And we're trying to give everybody a little bit of something. You're also seeing designs now for Warhorse and Chris Bay. So we're trying to scratch everybody's itch the best we can.
Right. No, I love it. Because, I mean, and here's an old school reference. Nick, you won't get this, but I mean, there are guys that like Madden, and then there were guys who like Tecmo Bowl. And, I can dig both, but man, I'll sit and play a game like this new one. I can't wait. This is so cool. But
absolutely.
But at the same time, you're not. It's a throwback, but you're not reinventing the wheel. Like there were people who just kind of, there were some of the old WCW games where they said, "Oh, you know what? We're not going to use a ring." And it's like, well, why are you making a wrestling game then if you're not going to use a ring?
Yeah. I think that was one of those like games that kind of got away from some people. And the one thing you have to be as the producer of a wrestling game is you have to be a fan, because if it's not authentic,
right,
the fan will sniff it out, in the first 5 seconds.
Right.
The wrestling fan. Now, in wrestling video games, you have to get over the wrestling fan and the video game fan.
Right.
And if those two don't connect, a lot of times I remember, people are always saying, "Oh, your scores are low. Your scores are low." The Metacritic, and you go, "Yeah, but like 3 guys aren't wrestling fans." Right. So we're already, and again, that sounds defensive, but
right.
When we were wrong, we always had clipping issues. That's
right.
It was just the nature of the beast, buddy. I don't know how else to.
Right.
And we did the best we could each year. Those guys at THQ were solid as a rock. I mean, I don't know how they got it out, and I'm talking about my time when I went to WWE and worked with THQ,
mm-hmm.
And they were able to churn out some really, really interesting games with, very deep with storyline and cut scenes and motion capture. Yeah. I mean, they could tell you some stories. And then on top of that, they had to deal with me. Am I allowed to curse on here, Al? Or
I'll bleep it, but go ahead.
I was an asshole, because time and it's always, you're always up against budget and time,
Yeah.
And those guys, we talk about it today. I still keep in touch with them and we laugh about it. But man, I look back and they did some unbelievable work.
When it came to the motion capture stuff, who were some of the guys doing the ring work back then?
So when I first started, it was Dr. Tom Pritchard
mm-hmm.
and Just Incredible. He was PJ Walker.
Okay.
And they were really great. Dr. Tom was able. All you had to do was kind of explain your vision, and Dr. Tom could work it out. But we didn't have the proper setup for them. We didn't have a ring. We had crash mats, and they were operating off of boxes and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then a year later, I remember it was Triple H who said, we got these 2 young kids that could do this motion capture. And I remember going, yeah, but we're not allowed to we can't pull somebody off the road. He goes, well, they haven't hit the road yet, and they could do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Matt and Jeff, the Hardy Boys.
Right.
I mean, one full week of those 2 just, doing anything and everything. There were times where you'd have to talk them down. Like, no, we're not going to do that. We'll take care of that in post,
You're going to need that footage, yes.
Yeah. You were there when we had
Spike Dudley.
Spike. Yep.
That was
and Guido.
Yeah.
Guido was terrific. James.
Mm-hmm.
I think we had Dawn Marie come in to do the Diva stuff. It was. Listen,
mm-hmm.
I got to meet a bunch of great people. I'm still in touch with Tommy Dreamer.
That's awesome.
I always say there's not too many guys
mm-hmm.
in that industry. I don't pretend to be in that industry that you don't hear a bad word. You'll never hear a negative word about Dreamer.
Right.
Spike
Dudley, one of my favorite memories of doing anything involved with wrestling was that day with Spike, because we were there with there were a couple of us from the wrestling side of things, but there were a few guys there from the video game side. And there was one guy who was just of the The whole, oh,
He
this
was
is old.
obnoxious, yeah.
Oh, do you remember that?
Yes, and I was begging him. And if you remember, our studio manager, Andy, had the guy sign a waiver.
Okay.
And I was begging Spike, like, man, please don't. Like, he goes, no, I'm not going to do anything, like, bad, you know. He goes, but, and I said, okay, well, let him know that everything that they see hurts.
Yeah. Well, that would, because the guy finally asked at the end of the day if he could get a picture with Spike. And Spike suggested, you know what would look great? Camel clutch, because that way you could see both our faces. Sure. And he just cinched it in, and that guy learned respect.
And the noise that guy made is still...
It wakes me up in my dreams, haunts me.
Your column the next day started with that, saying, you know, priceless.
Oh, man.
I remember that, Al.
That is so awesome. Oh, man. Listen, I don't want to keep you, but, man, promise me you'll come back before the new game comes out so we can talk about that specifically some more.
Can I just reminisce one thing with Nick on the phone?
Please do. Please.
All ears.
WXO.
There you go.
Daily. Somehow we're a part of a fledgling independent wrestling show. So we were all we were video game guys, and Al was a writer, and somehow we got thrust into this. And I remember your poor dad had to handle all the music and the music cues after we'd spent the entire night writing like 4 or 5 TVs. Do you remember any of that, Al?
I remember all of that. That was Dan Severn and Ted DiBiase and Stan Lane. Oh, man. We
were waiting on James the whole night because he was in the back. Stan Lane had been beaten up, and they shot it like 12 different times.
Yes, I have pictures of that song with the makeup. Oh man, that
Dan
was good
Severn,
times.
we wanted to get him coming out of the car, Nick. So we wanted it to be like, who is this guy? Well, we set up the camera, and Dan Severn gets out on the other side of the car and walks away. Like, cut. I don't think we were fixing that in post, Al.
No, very little you could do with that.
But what I remember most, Al, was we were all punchy, tired, punch drunk, whatever you want to say. You had us rolling. Man. I remember we were in that tiny car looking for a place to eat.
Yes. Oh, man.
Lakeland Civic Center.
Right. Holy cow. Man.
Look, listen, it was hard, it was tough, but it's still one of my best memories, my favorite memories.
Absolutely. Holy cow. Thank you for that, man.
Thank you.
Oh, my. All right. Yeah. We're coming back. We're going to do a full episode on some of this stuff, man. That's priceless. Thank you so much.
Hey, best to you. Best to your wife. Nick, it was a pleasure to meet you. I'm a big fan of your mom and dad. Always have been. Al, you and the family stay safe, okay?
All right. Thank you very much, Mike. And there's a kid. Take care, buddy. Thank you, Mike Archer. Man, love catching up with that guy. I can't wait to talk to him after the brand new video game comes out. Man, Retromania. I can't wait. That looks like that's going to be a ball. Man, in fact, you know what? I'm going to challenge. Not only am I going to challenge you to a game of that, or 17. I think you should get yourself a copy and maybe devote an entire episode playing it and reviewing it and showing, taking it through its paces, kicking the tires for everybody.
I'll get to it right now.
Yeah, but you know what? We're sitting here talking about video games and wrestling. Over the years, there have been a couple of guys who have been influenced by video games, or rather their characters have. But there's one guy in particular. Boy, I haven't tried this in a long time. Let me see if it still works. Glacier. Ray, how's it going?
It's great, Al. It's great. Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, we appreciate it. We were just talking about video games. I said, we gotta get Glacier on here. Before we start, 2 things. Number one, could you age already? because you're making the rest of us really look bad. I mean, my wife's going to watch this, and you're setting way too high a bar.
Well, thank you, man. But I tell you what, one, I credit, both my parents had really good genetics. They, and my mom, who just passed away a couple years ago, she looked, 20 years younger than she really was. But I always say, though, just because I have gray hair doesn't mean I have to show gray hair. So, I may be cheating a little bit.
Nice. And the second thing before we get into it, man, I got to tell you, AEW, seeing you come out there, that had to feel good.
Oh,
that pop.
Well, and I tell you, I did the thing, and it's funny afterwards. Like I talked to Cody the next day. We're talking, and he said, "Man," he goes, "You did exactly," and he never even told me to do this. He said, "You did exactly what I needed you and Tommy Dreamer and Billy Gunn to do," because there were so many young indie wrestlers who really had never been in front of a crowd like that. And he said, "I needed you guys to go in and just slow things down," And so when we were MJF and I did this standoff, that I totally, you never know. I didn't know if you get booed or laughed out of the place or what. So
right.
I was very, very humbled by it. But when the one side started chanting Glacier and then the other side started chanting Glacier and MJF was getting ready to go in this, I just kind of looked at it and said, "Hold on, just give me this minute." So it was a blast. And of course, for the people that may not know, Dusty was a mentor of mine, like he was to Dallas and a lot of other people. But I've known Cody since he was a kid, and it's just I'm so thrilled and so happy to see the success he's having, because it's something that drives him to put a product out there that he can really be proud of, and that wrestling fans can be proud of. And
right.
I think they're on a good track right now.
Right. Very cool. Well, this week, I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but this week we've been talking about video games, the evolution of video games over the years with professional wrestling. And like I said, you can't talk about video games and wrestling without bringing up Glacier, because, man, back in '96, I guess Bischoff, with his love of martial arts, video games being so hot, this was kind of a natural thing. How was this idea pitched to you?
You know what? Dallas actually, originally set up a meeting with me and Eric, and it was literally a dinner, and about a 3-hour dinner, and he and Eric kind of initially pitched it to me, and obviously I didn't realize I was kind of being interviewed for that kind of position at that time, but it started there. I mean, he saw enough in me to say, "Okay, I think you're the guy to at least be the first of the group," and then it kind of and then I recommended a young man named Andre Freitas, who is a tremendous film special effects artist, and they hired Andre to actually create from drawing board to finished product the look of all
right.
4 of us. And so and then we started with like 150 names, and we whittled it down to about 10, and then finally settled on Glacier, and then we were off and running.
Obviously, everyone kind of makes the comparison to Mortal Kombat, which was the hot game at the time.
Yeah.
Were there any issues with the video game company when it first came out, or over time?
I'll tell you what. Yes, there was. When I first, if you remember, they did the vignettes. Which, listen, I'll be the first to say they ran the vignettes way too long. But once again, this was totally uncharted territory when we were doing this. Of course, yes, pro wrestling, it plays off of what's popular in society. Sure. Mortal Kombat was huge at that time. Turner Broadcasting, which a lot of people don't remember, was actually co-producing the Mortal Kombat TV series. Right. And so their whole thing was like, can we bring this to the wrestling ring? But yeah, the main thing is my look originally looked a lot like, Sub-Zero, and I mean, even like, down to the same kind of, my tights and everything would look kind of the same. And so I remember Bischoff calling me into his office. And this was when his office was still at CNN Center, and he walked in and he said, we got a little bit of a problem here. the video game company had contact and said, "Hey, this looks, way, way too similar." And I'll never forget Eric saying, "Ray, you know me, I love a good fight, but we're gonna lose this one if we go against them. So we need to repackage your look a little bit." So that's they kind of we stepped back and did that a little bit, and then they seemed to be okay with it after that.
Cool. Well, listen, we got to get going here, but promise me you'll come back, because I got a lot of stuff I got to ask you, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me on.
All right, we'll talk to you soon, Ray.